This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Tuesday, the 9th of October, 2021. We have just spent the last half hour or so looking at gladiator movies, particularly looking at scenes from the Russell Crowe Gladiator movie from about 20 years ago, and then a couple of scenes from Spartacus from about 55 years ago and or 60 years ago now. There are a few things that stand out to me that I'd like to talk about, but if you have any observations that compare and contrast how they're shown, I'd be happy to answer what you think. Yes?
It's just a minor question. It's not exactly about comparison, but I never got this answered last year. Why does the slave in Spartacus revolt? I'm just curious about that.
It's humanity. The movie Gladiator, the first one, is a bit cartoonish. It shows it does an incredible job of showing the clothing people wore and the scope of Rome through computer effects, and the fighting is just over the top incredible, like superheroic. The battle with the chariots and the battle with the tigers and the gladiator champion and all of that. That's just above and beyond normal gladiator combat. But none of it was authentic. In the case of Spartacus, you actually see the types of gladiators they actually had. They have the Thracian, who has the tiny little buckler shield and the weird little short sword. And he's really good at close range. And then you've got the guy with the more unwieldy weapons, but he's got longer range. You've got the trident guy with his weighted net. And it's sort of like a contest. Who would win? Godzilla versus King Kong. Who would win? Voldemort versus, I don't know.
I don't know. Name a villain from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Sauron or the Nazgul or something. It's like, which truck is better, Ford or Chevy? You get these things, and the gladiator combats weren't so much about the individual gladiators, usually. There were exceptions. Usually it was about the type of gladiator. Can a given Thracian beat a given Trident man, and vice versa? And there were people on both sides, and there were other kinds of gladiators too. So the kind of gladiators that you saw in the second movie, those are authentic. That's actually what gladiators look like. I'm getting to your question.
Sure, I know.
The second movie is far less spectacular, and it's far more realistic. First of all, genuine fighting and combat, and I've been in fights, I've never been in Mortal Kombat, is ugly. It's not beautiful. There's a lot of back and forth because you can't hit reset, respawn, or load an old save. If you screw up, you're dead or you're maimed and then dead. And that's it. You die right here, right now, bloody and in pain. So everything that you try to do is to survive. When you're fighting someone, notice their feet and their breathing, because both their feet and their breathing will telegraph what they're going to do. Their breathing indicates when they're getting ready to exert. Their feet indicate where they're going to place their weight and how they're going to move. Now, a good fighter can fake things, can mimic things. But in general terms, if you're able to get a sense of how your opponent is breathing and how they're moving their feet, you can better prepare. So a lot of the back and forth, the sort of ugly twitching that goes on, is each guy trying to decide, am I feinting, which is a fake, or am I really going to do this? And they're sort of playing around with their weight, and they're trying to get the other guy to commit. If the other guy commits, you can counterattack. If the guy with the Thracian sword and buckler can get inside the trident, he wins. If the guy with the trident can knock the Thracian down and kill him at range, the trident guy wins. The first scene was shot, or there's the two scenes with the chariots and the single combat with the tigers. Bum 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 bum. It's exciting. Music is pumping. Blood is flowing. The crowd is into it. They're watching every move. Yeah! Kill! Everyone is just totally involved. Have you ever been to a real baseball game or football game or soccer match or basketball game or any genuine sporting event? Are people like that all the time? Hell no. You're eating your sandwiches, you're talking to the people. The second movie shows this. You have the men fighting for their lives in the background, and in the foreground, you've got the two guys saying, "Hey, how do you get me that appointment as the head of the Roman Guard?" And the women are talking. And then they look when it gets exciting. And that's what we do. So Gladiator basically portrays fighting, the first movie, the dramatic movie, portrays fighting as if it's the most exciting thing in the world. And everyone is into it. All 50,000 members of the audience are into it, including the emperor, who's practically drooling over the blood. The second movie is more true because it shows how people really are. In the second movie, what are the women choosing those men for? It's pornographic. They're not choosing them as fighters. They're choosing them so that they can imagine them because they're beefcake, which is a sort of casual way of talking about handsome men in tights. That's what the women are choosing. They're choosing handsome men that they can watch move around. So there's the pornography of sex. And they talk about this with the men, too. That slave girl is not being bought for her ability with wine and pouring. She is being bought to be a pleasure slave for Crassus. And the Roman aristocracy, of course, would sleep with their slaves. The question is, do you do it indiscreetly in a way that humiliates your spouse? And a good Roman would never do that. They would always be somewhat discreet. So they say, well, the marriage contract said no harems, at least under the same roof. Not under different roofs, though. So there's the pornography of sex, blue pornography, in the second scene. And there has to be when you're talking about stuff like this. But there's also red pornography, the pornography of death. Why aren't they content to just watch a match? Why aren't they content to watch a gladiator version of WWE where the guys beat on one another and you see them jump around and you see them do exciting stuff? Because they want to see death. They want to see lives end for their pleasure. There's something decadent about that. There's something, from our point of view as a culture, both Judeo-Christian and American secular, that's sick about that. Watching other human beings die for fun, is that good in anyone's book? Well, these people are so wealthy and so powerful, they don't have to care. They don't have to put on appearances. And they can cloak it and justify it by saying, hey, we're Romans. We're wolves among men. Wolves are not gentle with their prey. We're watching fighting and real death because we're Romans, see? And death is just entertainment for us. Spartacus was made by communists and some of the best people in Hollywood in terms of skills. In the early 1950s, American institutions were purged of communists. Why? Because there were communist infiltrators working for Moscow in our society. Our atom bomb secrets were sent to Moscow via this network of American traders. Our hydrogen bomb secrets were sent to Moscow via American traders. American traders who worked for the communist cause existed within government. This brought about the McCarthy era, which is named after an American Republican senator who was a crass demagogue. Crass in the sense that he was uncultured, a demagogue in the sense that basically he would threaten people by saying that he had lists of people who were communists working in the army or in the State Department or in the federal bureaucracy. Was not a nice man. Was a man that ruined a lot of lives. And part of that McCarthy era was that people were blacklisted. If you in the 1930s, before World War II, when the country was in the midst of the Depression, had sympathized with socialists or communists, you weren't going to be hired. You were going to be canceled. And a lot of people in the early 1950s, because theater attracts all sorts of special individuals, individuals who have different sexualities than the norm, individuals who have different politics than the norm. And there's the emotionalism of it. A good actor has to sell emotion. So liberalism and progressivism, socialism and communism has a strong emotional appeal. So a lot of people, both behind and in front of the camera, lost their jobs in Hollywood and couldn't get hired. Not in this country. They had to go overseas or they had to find different work jobs. Now that's pretty nasty. What's happening now is worse. The McCarthy era lasted a few years, short years, and then it ended. McCarthy went too far, and on national television he basically imploded. Black and white TV, but still national television. Today we have cancel culture. God forbid somebody says something that's a thought crime, does something that isn't woke or politically correct. You've got a ravening mob howling for their blood. So I don't listen much to people who are all sanctimonious about how horrible the McCarthy stuff was. The answer to your question is that that movie was made by people who believe that the oppressed, please wait, should rise up and kill their oppressors. And that slave had just had enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So who was here yesterday? B-Day people? A-Day people, you stick around, come back. B-Day people, you're gone. Have a nice day.